Hello once again, chess enthusiasts. Having already solved in this USSR series problems 1, 2 and 3 and having presented them on YouTube, I had already mentioned that I'd taken a quick look at number 4 and thought that it might pose a few problems to me, and so it proved. In fact, it caused me quite a number of difficulties, such that I spent what seemed to be an inordinate amount of time looking at it, and I just couldn't find it. I had several ideas, but none of them seemed to work. Now this is a mate in 3, of course. Problems 1, 2 and 3 were mates in 2. Problems 4, 5 and 6 are mates in 3. Just before carrying on, what is interesting to note is here, this is the position of course, but just looking at this, problems 1 to 2 is a mate in 2, and then problems 4 to 6 is a mate in 3. Now, when I decided to try and solve number 3, of course, it had me wondering now, is it in fact a mate in 2 just for 1 and 2, and they've overlooked it here, and it should in fact be 3 to 6 a mate in 3, but that didn't seem to be logical. I thought to myself, well, surely it's the first 3 mate in 2 and then the next 3 mate in 3. And I thought, well, have they made a mistake? And the easiest way I thought to verify this one is to have a look at the Russian version and see what it says, because I think to myself there could be a mistake in the transcription. And if you have a look here, you'll see that 1 to 3 mate in 2, 4 to 6. So they made a mistake on the English one. So even our Soviet friends can blunder, although of course they could blame the typesetters. We'll let them off on that one. And indeed, if we make any mistakes in any of these, we'll let ourselves off, because they are tricky ones. Just getting back to this position, it is a mate in 3. And when you look at it, you can see that yet again the stalemate idea is firmly in mind. In fact, though, in this particular position, the king can move to 1 square, and it's this one here, F1. All the other squares are covered. There is yet again a preponderance of material on the white side, and it's not only a question of finding the key move, but also to occupy or at least control key squares. Now, clearly the checkmate will take place in the middle of the board here, although we have pieces right on the edge, the king on A2 and the bishop, white squared bishop, on H1. The 2 bishops come into play very nicely, and you would imagine that they could work together quite nicely to secure a checkmate. But like I say, it did give me enormous problems, and I wasn't quite sure how to approach this one. But I thought to myself, maybe a waiting move yet again. This is generally the theme. And the idea is that you do need to play for time. You don't want to allow black a stalemate, of course. It's unlikely though, because with black having a bishop and a pawn that can freely move, you can probably rule that one out. So let's rule it out, which is what I did. And I decided to go for a waiting move. Now, which piece would you think would be the proper one to choose here for a waiting move? Just have a look at that for a moment. Pause the video if you wish, but I'll come back in a few moments and I'll tell you how my mind worked once it was able to work. As already stated, I couldn't solve this the day that I tried. I spent quite a bit of time looking at it, the better part of an hour in fact, and I couldn't get anywhere with it. And then the following day I had another look at it, and it jumped out at me. There was one part of it that I just couldn't figure out, and then it clicked with me. And then, amazing as that may seem, I had a look at number 5, I solved it. I had a look at number 6 and solved that. So I have in fact now solved half of them. But they're not joking, these Soviet friends, when they say that they get more difficult as you move along, and they do. There's no doubt about that. But what would you say is the key move here? I'll give you a clue. It's a king move. And like I say, you're waiting. You're just waiting to pounce. But bear in mind that once you move your king, it has to be to the right square. If it's not to the right square, you won't be able to secure checkmate. Now the king can move to any one of 5 squares. Clearly, it's not going to do you any favours going here, because this bishop will just put you in check, and then you'll have to move the king again or interpose one of the pieces. So that's not going to do you any good. Equally, to move the king here wouldn't do you any good, because the bishop can check you again. So you can rule out these 2 squares. The squares that you would rule in would be this corner one where you can't be checked, but it seems to be moving further away from the field of play. It's not really protecting or looking to protect any key squares. And here and here look like distinct possibilities, because you're keeping the king on a light square, light coloured square, so there's no threat from the bishop by means of check. So I'd say that although this is acceptable because the bishop can't reach it, it doesn't look right. It's too edge of the board, and these 2 are out. Clearly, sorry, this one here is out. So it's either b3 or b1. Just have a look at that for a moment and decide for yourself which square it has to be then. It's on the b line, b1 or b3. And why would you move it to either one of these? Okay, well, I had a quick look at b1, and it looks useful, because you think to yourself, well, you're covering this important square here just in case the king eventually has a means of finding its way over here to otherwise escape checkmate. And then I looked at b3 and I thought, well, b3 protects c4, and it also protects c2, which is what b1 does. So with b3, you're getting the best of both. You're covering these 2 squares, whereas b1 only covers that. So just to move on to my pocket chair set again, the move in fact is king b3. Okay, now what can black do in this situation? Well, he has 2 pieces. Well, he has a piece in the form of a bishop, and he has a pawn. So let's try moving the pawn. What happens if you push this pawn forward? That's the only place where it can go. What would you say would happen? Well, what immediately occurs to anyone is that this bishop now is no longer protected. Would you take it? What else would you do? This is a mate in 3, remember, so you can take the bishop or you can move anywhere that you want, and then you still 1 more move. So it's not as restrictive. The lower the number, in other words, if it's a mate in 2, it might look as though it's straightforward, but it's still very difficult. The greater the number of moves you have, it's advantageous in the one sense that you have more leeway, you have more time, hence more moves. But in another respect, it's more complicated because there are more replies available, because as you move to each next stage, there are additional variations to consider. So there are pluses and minuses whether you're at a low number, a mate in 1, 2, or a higher number, 3, 4 and upwards. And that's what I discovered when I eventually solved numbers 5 and 6. They are both mates in 3, so I'll have completed 3 mates in 2, problems 1 to 3, and 3 mates in 3, problems 4 to 6. So if white does not take that bishop, where does he go that would be useful? This square currently is available. Would you want to protect that square like this? And now the king can't move because the queen covers the D line. It covers the G1 to A7 line. This bishop covers these two squares. And this bishop covers here. So the king cannot move. So what would happen then? Is white threatening checkmate on the move? And the answer to that is no, he isn't, because although he could come here, black can escape here. So that wouldn't be in 3 moves. And I've been right through this, and believe me, put it to the test yourself, but there is no way that you can administer mate in one more move after that. No matter what black does, it wouldn't make any difference. White still couldn't checkmate within one further move. Because even if he took the queen down here, the king, let's go back. Can't be done. There's just no way that it can be secured. So really there's nothing to be gained by moving that bishop, and there's nothing to be gained by moving the king again. There's no need to do that. That serves its purpose, as will be seen. And moving this bishop, where you're going to put it that would be advantageous. It's already on the right diagonal there. And if you put it here, it's going to be taken. Put it here, it's going to be taken. Put it here, it's taking it out of play. You need this bishop here to cover these squares. So the correct move is to take it. So play queen f4. And now, no matter what black plays, it should, in theory at least, be mate next move. So what moves does white have there? Sorry, what moves does black have there, I should say. Well, let's look at the king moves first. You can go to d1. And then queen d2. So that's checkmate. So that's eliminated, that's fine. You can go to d3. And then white can go here. Queen e4, which is also checkmate. What about if he goes here? Well, that looks like checkmate to me as well. So that this happened in a previous one where you can use the queen twice to checkmate. In that particular problem, I think it were problem number 2, he could checkmate on either g5 or f4. So this is a similar situation to that, because the bishop controls this important square here. The king, that's the beauty of the king going to b3, it controls c4, the bishop and the queen, so everything is covered. So either king move there, king d1 or king d3, results in checkmate. Now the king can't move down here anywhere, it can't move here because of the bishop, and it can't move there, so it's gone to the only 2 squares. So the only other available move would be g3. And then queen f3 is checkmate, because it continues to cover here. It covers here, here, and the bishop covers, so that's fine. The king, incidentally, does not come into this one at all, so, but it is needed, believe you me. So we'll put this back how it was. So G4 does not work. Okay, let's try the bishop moves then. What does he have there? Let's try bishop G3 or H2. Try bishop G3 first. Then queen D2 check. Covering there, 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 then there. So he has to escape to here. That's forced. And then queen G2 is mate, because it controls the second rank and this bishop nicely controls here. And as can be seen, if he'd gone to H2, it wouldn't have made a jot of difference. So it's the same result. So where else can the bishop go? Try E3. Then comes queen G4 check. That is a nice move, because it covers the square here. This is covered. But these two are not, and nor is that. So what happens if he goes to D3? Then queen C4. Now with the bishop having gone to E3, the king can't use that as an escape square. So that's checkmate. So he moved bishop E3, then queen G4 check. Instead of king D3, he can't go to D2 or D1, nor E1. So try king F2 or king F1. It makes no odds. Then queen G2 is mate. As can be seen, the queen is protected by the bishop. It controls these four squares here and here on the other side of the king, and the bishop controls here. And if it were at F1, it would be in exactly the same position. So what that proves is that bishop E3 doesn't work. So we'll put these back. So what about bishop D2? That's hitting white's bishop, black squared bishop. Well, you take it. What does black have then? Well, he has one move. He can't go here because of the queen, or here because of the queen here with the bishop. He can't go here or here. And he can't go here. So he has to, by process of elimination, play king F1. And then again, like just a moment ago, queen G2. This is a very good way of doing it because the bishop stops the flight square. So queen G2 is mate. Okay, now what we've tried is, we've tried this pawn move, it doesn't work. We've tried to here. Before I come here, I'm going to leave this until last because this, in my opinion, is the main line. If you move this bishop anywhere down here, like here for instance, then you run into this again. It's just the same as coming here. There's no real difference. The queen's protected. These squares are all protected. He has to go to f1, and then by implication queen g2 finishes the job. So none of those bishops down the h2 to b8 diagonal works. Fortunately for white, unfortunately for black. So we played king b3. This is the killer punch. What happens if you play bishop c1? We've tried every other move. Just to go through them again, move the pawn, move the bishop to here, here, or anywhere there. And there's only the one king move. Just before we do that, yeah, there is one king move. And that's the only king move that he has. Before we look at bishop c1, let's just take a look at this. Can you see the move for white there? Well, it's a pretty neat one, as a matter of fact. It's here, check, and then black only has one move, which is there, and then you come here, covered. You're covering the E line, you're covering the first rank, bishop's covering here and behind, so that is checkmate as well in 3 moves. So we'll put that back and we'll revert to black's last bishop move, which is bishop c1. Now, on the first day that I tried to solve this, I'd solved all this, but I couldn't find an answer to this. Just, please, if you will, just take a good look at this and pause it, and I can guarantee that in most cases it will be almost impossible to solve, and you'll think, no, all this is for nothing. Everything that I've just described there is for absolutely nothing. And there you'd be mistaken. Can you see the winning move there? Okay, it's a sacrifice. Well, bishop here wouldn't do much good. You'd sacrifice it, he'd take it. And then how do you secure checkmate from that position? Well, quite simply, you can't, can you? There are plenty of escape squares. I mean, nothing would work there. Come here, escape squares here, bishop. It would all be for nothing, yeah. So you can't afford to sacrifice the bishop, nor the other bishop. And you're not inflicting a sacrifice with the king. So therefore it must be the queen. Where would you sacrifice the queen there? I mean, putting it down here, it would just be taken, wouldn't it? And you can't put it, it would be taken if you put it here. And what would you have for it? And if you went to d2, just take it. Well, the sacrificing, it suddenly hit me because I remember Cecil Purdy, the Australian international master and world champion at correspondence chess, who for many years propounded that you should check all checks. And that check is as good as you'll get. Just take a look at that. Now, why can you not take that queen? This is move number 2 by white, queen d1 check. The king can move to 2 other squares, and we'll come to those in just a moment. But why can you not take that queen? Let's just take it. And now it's white's 3rd move. And you can deliver checkmate here. Well, this is where the bishop finally comes into play. And that's what I couldn't see on the first time around, but I did see it on the... It only took me a few minutes, in fact, once I laid the board out again. It was the bishop c1, so I immediately went to it. And hey presto, there it is. Checkmate with the 2 bishops. There were no flight squares. This is where 2 bishops are supreme. There would be a flight square if he hadn't moved here. And that's why any other bishop move, the queen d1 sacrifice wouldn't work, because the king would simply take flight, but the bishop is in the way there. So that's why he can't afford to take the queen. But this is undoubtedly the main line and what the compiler of this problem wanted you to find. And fortunately for me, although under a time control I wouldn't have made it, but I don't think many people would. It's so staggering. So where does the king go? The black king, where does it go if it doesn't take the queen? Well, if it goes to e3, which is one of the flight squares, you just go here. And I was highly delighted to find that, because the bishop covers these 2, the queen covers here, and the queen covers here, and the bishop protects the queen. So that's no good. There's only one move left, and it's king f2. Now if you go to f3 on this one, you're letting him out of jail. I know it would be checkmate here, but it's in 4 moves, so that will be of no use. So what do? The final move, if you will, black's just moved king f2, white to checkmate now, 1 move. Do you see it? Controlling the squares. A common feature is when you check the king, it controls the square behind it. So the move in question is queen e1. Controls the e line, backed up by the bishop. And it covers this vital square here. Covers all these, the bishop covers those, and that is checkmate. Just take a look at that final position. Isn't that glorious? And Capablanca once said that chess may well be played out. He said that over 100 years ago. Sorry Kappa, you were wrong. You're a great player, you're on my list of the 16 best chess players of all time, but you were wrong. It is not played out, and that is proof positive that it's not played out. Oh, Kappa would certainly have been able to have solved that, there's no doubt in my mind. Any great chess player would be able to, but it's no mean feat. And that's a mate in 3, and I truly believe that I did very well there, even though it took me a long time. But it was just this tricky bishop c1 move, and I just couldn't get my head around it, and then it all of a sudden occurred to me, queen d1 check. I thought, good God. Yes, good God, but that does improve your play, because you can be on the lookout for checks like that in future. Remember Cecil Purdy's advice, check all checks. Before you do anything else, just check checks. Because there was a game once, it was in the 1937 World Championship match between Dr. Erver from Holland and Dr. Alekhine, the Franco-Russian world champion challenger, because he'd lost to Erver in 1935. And there was one of the games in progress where Alekhine, if he delivered a check, he'd have forced the king to take the queen, and then with his knight he would have taken a pawn and forked the king and queen, and he missed it. And then Erver missed it. And then Alekhine missed it again. Now, with one of the greatest chess players of all time, who missed a crushing move the first time, and like Purdy said in his analysis, it would have been devastating the second time, but he missed it twice. And then over, no points, because he accidentally got it right. He was oblivious to it, as he admitted after the match. During the match, he was oblivious to it. He just played a move that stopped it, without realizing that he was stopping it. And Alekhine was oblivious to it. It was incredible. I may go over that one of these days with you, but it's an incredible position. But this is equally incredible, and I trust that you all enjoyed it. And we've just gone over the halfway stage of an hour in this video time. So I'll draw close to this one, and we'll meet again for number 5. Enjoy your chess, and all the very best. Goodbye for now.